The dust hadn't settled from the stagecoach wheels when Emma Hartford realized she'd made a terrible mistake. Dodge City, Kansas, stretched before her like a sun-bleached skeleton, all wooden bones and no heart. She clutched her carpet bag tighter, feeling the weight of her mother's silver locket inside, the last thing of value she owned. 3 days without food made her lightheaded, and the corset her stepfather had forced her to wear before she fled Philadelphia seemed to squeeze the very life from her lungs. The Lucky Star Saloon loomed ahead, its painted sign faded by prairie winds. Emma's stomach twisted with hunger and humiliation as she pushed through the swinging doors. The smell of whiskey and tobacco smoke hit her like a fist. A dozen pairs of eyes turned toward her, trail-worn men with dust in their beards and suspicion in their stares. Behind the bar, a heavy-set man with mutton chops polished a glass, his expression hardening as he took in her threadbare traveling dress and desperate eyes. Before we continue with Emma's story, I'd love to ask a small favor. If you're enjoying this tale, please take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. It truly means so much to us and motivates us to keep bringing you quality stories of love, courage, and adventure from the American frontier. Thank you. "We don't serve ladies here," the bartender said, the word ladies dripping with skepticism. Emma's hand trembled as she reached into her bag, pulling out the locket. The silver caught the lamplight, spinning on its delicate chain. "I need work, food. I can clean, cook, serve drinks, anything honest. This is all I have to offer as collateral." The bartender's laugh was cruel. "Collateral? Girl, you're in the wrong kind of establishment for—" "I'll take her." The voice came from the corner, deep and steady as a river current. Emma turned to see a man rising from a poker table, cards forgotten on the green felt. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin that spoke of years under the open sky. Dark hair touched his collar, and his eyes, pale blue like a winter morning, held an intensity that made her breath catch. A scar ran along his jawline, silvery white against his tan skin. He wore dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a dark vest over a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. A Colt revolver sat easy on his hip. He crossed the room in 4 long strides, his spurs chiming softly. When he reached Emma, he didn't take the locket. Instead, he looked directly into her hazel eyes with an expression she couldn't quite read. Part anger, part something gentler. "Put that away," he said quietly. "Silver isn't what we need here. What I need is someone who can cook for my crew and keep the bunkhouse decent. You look like you can handle hard work." Emma's throat tightened. I will, I promise "James Coulter," he interrupted, extending his hand. When she hesitated, he added, "I don't bite, Miss Hartford." Emma Hartford. She placed her trembling hand in his. His palm was calloused but warm, his grip careful despite the obvious strength in those fingers. "Rode into town to buy cattle," James said, his gaze never leaving hers. "Seems I found something more important." Before she could process those words, he turned to the bartender. "Put a meal on my tab, Tom. The lady needs feeding before we ride out." The bartender's eyes narrowed. "Coulter, you sure about this? Girl looks like trouble." "Then it's a good thing I know how to handle trouble." James pulled out a chair at an empty table, waiting until Emma sat before taking the seat across from her. "When's the last time you ate?" "Tuesday." Her voice came out as a whisper, his jaw tightened, that scar becoming more prominent. It's Friday, Emma. You're telling me you've gone 3 days without food? She nodded, shame burning her cheeks. I had to leave Philadelphia quickly. My stepfather arranged a marriage to his business partner, a man who'd beaten his first wife to death. I took what money I had and bought a ticket west, but it wasn't enough. I've been walking since the stage dropped me in Abilene 2 days ago. Something dangerous flickered in James's eyes. Any man who'd force a woman into that deserves a bullet, not a business deal. Tom brought over a plate of steak, potatoes, and bread so fresh Emma could smell the yeast. She stared at it, tears blurring her vision. I can't. I have no way to pay you back. The Double C is about 15 miles northeast. That's how we do things at the Double C Ranch. Eat slowly. Your stomach's gonna rebel if you rush it. She tried to maintain dignity, but hunger won. The first bite of meat nearly made her sob. James watched without speaking, occasionally sipping his whiskey, his expression unreadable, but his presence somehow comforting. The Double C is about 15 miles northeast, he said after she'd eaten half the plate. I run 200 head of cattle with help from 5 men. Good men who'll treat you with respect or answer to me. The work's hard. You'll be cooking 3 meals a day, doing laundry, keeping the main house and bunkhouse clean. Winters are brutal. Summers'll bake you. Loneliness out there can be worse than hunger sometimes. Emma set down her fork, meeting his gaze directly. Mr. Coulter, I've survived a mother's death, a stepfather's cruelty, and a 3-day walk across the Kansas prairie, with nothing but hope keeping me upright. I'm not afraid of hard work or loneliness. What I'm afraid of is being helpless again. A slow smile transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him almost boyish. Then I think you'll do just fine. Miss Hartford, we leave at dawn. Tom will set you up with a room for the night, on my tab, he added before she could protest. And Emma? He waited until she looked at him. You're not property. You're a person. Remember that. Those words, simple as they were, cracked something open inside her chest. She nodded, not trusting her voice. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in days, Emma stared at the ceiling and wondered what kind of man James Coulter really was. His hands had been gentle, despite their strength. His eyes had held anger at her situation, not at her. And when he'd said she was a person, not property, he'd spoken like a man who understood the difference mattered. She fell asleep, clutching her mother's locket, for the first time in months, allowing herself to hope. Dawn broke pink and gold over Dodge City. Emma woke to a soft knock on her door, James's voice calling that the horses were ready. She dressed quickly in her only other outfit, a simple cotton dress in pale blue that had seen better days, and braided her honey blonde hair down her back. When she emerged, James was waiting in the hallway, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. Figured you'd need this, he said, handing her one. It's a long ride. The coffee was strong and hot, burning all the way down. Emma savored it. I should tell you, I've never ridden a horse. Something like amusement flickered across James's face. Then today, you learn. Come on. Outside, 2 horses waited, a massive bay gelding that James mounted with easy grace, and a smaller dappled mare with kind eyes. James rode up beside the mare, extending his hand. Put your foot in the stirrup, grab my arm, and swing up. I've got you. Emma did as instructed, gasping as she found herself suddenly astride the mare, the ground seeming impossibly far below. The horse shifted beneath her, and she grabbed frantically for the saddle horn. Easy, James said, his voice that same steady current. Daisies gentle as they come. Hold the reins like this, he demonstrated, and let her follow Storm. She knows the way home. They rode out of Dodge City as the town woke around them, storekeepers opening shutters and dogs barking at passing wagons. Once they cleared the last buildings, the prairie opened up before them. Endless rolling grassland dotted with wildflowers. The sky so big and blue, it hurt to look at. The wind smelled of sage and sun-warmed earth. Emma's body protested every step the mare took, her back and thighs screaming within an hour. But she bit her lip and stayed silent, determined not to complain. James seemed to sense her discomfort anyway. "First time's always the hardest," he said, slowing Storm so they rode side by side. "By next week, you won't even notice. By next month, you'll wonder how you ever walked anywhere." "How long have you had the ranch?" Emma asked, partly from curiosity, partly to distract herself from the pain. 7 years. Bought it with money I saved from trail drives up to Montana. Back then, it was just me and a falling-down shack. Built it into something worth having. Pride colored his voice, subtle but real. "The men who work for me, they're not just hired hands. They're family. Lost souls who needed a place to belong. Same as I did once." "Were you a lost soul, Mr. Coulter?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My parents died of cholera when I was 16. Left me and my younger sister Mary with nothing. I worked cattle drives, saved every penny, sent money to the family who took Mary in. She was going to come live with me once the ranch was stable." His voice went flat, emotionless in a way that hurt to hear. "She died 4 years ago. Influenza. I wasn't there." Emma's chest tightened with shared grief. "I'm so sorry. That's why I said what I did last night, about you being a person, not property. Mary's intended treated her like she was his to command. Forbid her from writing to me, from making choices. When she got sick, he waited 2 days before calling a doctor, because he didn't want to waste money on woman's complaints. By the time I got the telegram," he stopped, his hands tightening on the reins until his knuckles whitened. "I swore I'd never let another woman suffer that way, if I could prevent it." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic thud of hoofbeats and the whisper of wind through grass. Finally, Emma spoke. "My mother used to say that grief is love with nowhere to go. Your sister knew you loved her, Mr. Coulter. Sometimes that's all we can give each other, the knowledge that we're loved." James looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. "Call me James, and your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." She was. Emma's fingers found her locket, tracing its familiar shape through her dress. "She died when I was 15. After that, my stepfather showed his true nature. He'd been kind enough when she was alive, but once she was gone." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. "You're safe now," James said quietly. "No one's going to hurt you at the Double C. You have my word." The strange thing was, Emma believed him. They reached the ranch as the sun climbed toward noon. Emma's first glimpse of the Double C took her breath away. Not because it was grand, but because it looked like home. A 2-story house, built of solid timber, stood at the heart of the property, its porch shaded by a roof that extended out over weathered rocking chairs. A barn large enough for a dozen horses sat to the left, its doors open to reveal neat stalls and the sweet smell of hay. Beyond that, corrals held cattle bearing the Double C brand, and in the distance, more grassland rolled toward a line of cottonwood trees that suggested water. 4 men emerged from the barn as they rode up, their expressions curious. James dismounted and came around to help Emma down. She tried to do it herself, but her legs buckled the moment her feet hit the ground. James caught her, his hands on her waist steadying her. "Go slow," he murmured. "Your body needs time to adjust." The touch of his hands seemed to burn through the fabric of her dress. Emma's heart hammered as she looked up to find his face mere inches from hers, close enough that she could see golden flecks in those pale blue eyes, close enough to smell leather and sage and something indefinably him. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Boss, everything all right?" The voice broke the spell. James stepped back, but his hand remained on her elbow, supporting her. "Men. Boss, everything all right? This is Emma Hartford. She'll be cooking and keeping house for us. Emma, these are my crew." He introduced them one by one. Marcus, the oldest at near 50, with gray threading his black hair and a kind smile that crinkled his eyes. Diego, mid-30s, lean and quick, with a slight accent that spoke of his Mexican heritage. Young Tommy, barely 20, with red hair and freckles and an eager puppy dog expression. And Samuel, a freed slave in his 40s, whose quiet dignity reminded Emma of her mother. "Welcome, Miss Hartford," Samuel said, tipping his hat. "It'll be mighty nice to have decent cooking again. No offense, boss." James snorted. "None taken. My biscuits could double as ammunition." The men laughed, and Emma felt something tight in her chest ease. This wasn't the cold, formal household of her stepfather's Philadelphia mansion. This was something different, warmer, more real. "Let me show you the house," James said, guiding her up the porch steps. The door opened onto a main room with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture that had seen years of use, and walls decorated with simple landscape paintings. To the left, a kitchen with a wood-burning stove and a hand pump at the sink. To the right, a hallway leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. "That door there is my room," James said, pointing. "Next one's yours. The other two are empty. Used to think I'd have a wife and children to fill them one day." His voice held an edge of old disappointment. "Bathroom's out back. There's a copper tub you can use after you've settled in. I heat water on the stove." He pushed open the door to what would be her room, and Emma gasped. It wasn't large, but it was clean and bright, with a real bed covered in a hand-stitched quilt, a dresser with a mirror, and a window overlooking the eastern prairie. Wildflowers in a mason jar sat on the dresser, clearly a recent addition. "Marcus's idea," James said, catching her stare. "Figured you'd want something pretty to look at." Emma's throat closed with emotion. "It's perfect. Thank you. Unpack and rest a bit. You don't start work until tomorrow." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Emma, I meant what I said. You're safe here." After he left, Emma sank onto the bed and let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from relief so profound it felt like a physical weight lifting. For the first time since her mother's death, she wasn't alone. The next morning, Emma woke before dawn, her body still aching, but her mind clear. She dressed in the cotton dress and a spare apron she found in the kitchen, then set about proving her worth. By the time James and the men emerged from the bunkhouse, the smell of fresh coffee, bacon, and biscuits filled the morning air. "Good Lord," Tommy breathed, staring at the laden table. "Is this real?" "Better be," Diego said, already reaching for a biscuit. "If I'm dreaming, don't wake me." James was the last to sit, his eyes meeting Emma's across the table. "You didn't have to start so soon." I wanted to. She poured coffee for each man, feeling their grateful stares. Besides, I made a promise. Fair work for fair wages. The meal passed in companionable silence, broken only by requests for seconds and thirds. Emma found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it, the simple act of feeding hungry men who appreciated every bite. This was nothing like Philadelphia, where meals were elaborate productions designed to impress, where her stepfather's guests critiqued every detail. This was honest and real. After breakfast, James lingered as the others headed to their morning chores. "You're good at this." "My mother taught me. She said cooking was love made visible." Emma began clearing plates, but James caught her wrist gently. "Let me help. You cooked. I'll clean." They worked side by side at the sink, James washing while Emma dried. The domesticity of it felt oddly intimate, the brush of his sleeve against hers, the way he'd hand her a plate, still dripping with soap bubbles, the quiet between them, more comfortable than words. "What made you choose cattle ranching?" Emma asked, hanging a dish towel to dry. "Freedom," James said simply. "Out here, a man's worth is measured by his work and his word, not his bloodline or bank account. I like that. I like knowing I built something with my own hands." He paused, staring out the window at his land. "And I like the honesty of it. Cattle don't lie. The land doesn't pretend. It either gives or it doesn't, and you learn to work with what you have." "That's beautiful," Emma said softly. He turned to look at her, that intensity back in his gaze. "You understand it. Most people don't." The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious. Then Marcus's voice called from outside, something about a fence needing repair, and James stepped back with what looked like reluctance. "I'll be working the north pasture today. If you need anything..." "I'll be fine," Emma assured him. "Go, do what needs doing." He nodded, but didn't move immediately. Finally, he said, "It's good having you here, Emma. Feels right somehow." Then he was gone, leaving Emma standing in the kitchen with her heart beating too fast and her mind full of questions she didn't dare ask. The days fell into a rhythm. Emma woke before dawn to start breakfast, cooked 3 meals a day for 6 hungry men, did laundry in the big copper tub behind the house, swept and cleaned and mended. The work was endless and exhausting, but it was hers. No one criticized her cooking or found fault with her housekeeping. The men thanked her after every meal, helped carry water when they saw her struggling, treated her with a respect she'd never experienced in her stepfather's house. And James was something else entirely. He was always respectful, always careful not to crowd her or make her uncomfortable. But Emma caught him watching her sometimes, when she was kneading bread, her hands working the dough with practiced efficiency, or when she stood on the porch at sunset, her face tilted toward the dying light. His gaze held something she couldn't quite name, something that made her skin warm and her breath catch. 2 weeks after her arrival, Emma was hanging laundry when a rattlesnake slithered out from under a rock near her feet. She froze, terror locking her muscles. The snake coiled, its tail buzzing a warning. "Don't move." James's voice came from behind her, low and steady. "Don't even breathe hard." She heard his footsteps, slow and measured. Then his arm came around her, pulling her back against his chest, even as his other hand drew his revolver. The gunshot was deafening. The snake's head exploded, its body thrashing briefly before going still. Emma's legs gave out. James caught her, lowering them both to the ground, her back still pressed to his front. His heart thundered against her shoulder blade, his breathing harsh in her ear. "You're safe," he murmured, one arm wrapped around her waist, the other still holding the smoking gun. "I've got you." Emma's whole body shook with delayed reaction. Without thinking, she turned in his arms, burying her face against his chest. His heartbeat steadied hers, the solid warmth of him grounding her. James's arms tightened, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe." They stayed like that for a long moment, the laundry forgotten, the wind whispering through the cottonwoods. Finally, Emma pulled back enough to look up at him. His face was so close, she could count the individual lashes framing those pale blue eyes, could see where the sun had carved fine lines at their corners. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always," he said, and the word held the weight of a promise. That night, Emma lay in bed, unable to sleep, her body still remembering the feel of James's arms around her, the steady beat of his heart, the way he'd held her like she was something precious. She pressed her palm to her own chest, feeling the rapid flutter there. This was dangerous. She'd sworn never to give her heart to anyone, never to let herself be vulnerable again. But James Coulter was making that impossible. The next evening, James found Emma on the porch after dinner, staring at the sunset. He sat in the rocking chair beside hers, not speaking at first, just sharing the quiet. Finally, he said, "Marcus told me you asked him to teach you to shoot." "I don't want to be helpless again," Emma said. "The snake yesterday, if you hadn't been there—" "I was there. I'll always be." He stopped, shaking his head. "But you're right. Out here, everyone needs to know how to protect themselves. I'll teach you myself, if you want." Emma turned to look at him, surprised. "You would do that?" "Emma, I'd do a lot of things for you." The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. "Probably more than I should." "What does that mean?" James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It means I made myself a promise after Mary died. I promised I wouldn't let myself care about anyone that deeply again, because losing them hurt too damn much. I've kept that promise for 4 years. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "Then you walked into that saloon, half-starved and desperate, but still holding your head high. And I felt something crack open inside me. Something I thought was sealed shut." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "James, I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing from what you've been through. I'm not asking for anything, Emma. I needed you to know. I see you, not as a housekeeper or someone to be pitied. I see a woman worth saving, worth everything." The words hung between them, as real and solid as the porch beneath their feet. Emma's hands trembled as she reached out, covering his hand with hers where it rested on the arm of his chair. "I see you too, James Coulter, and I'm not sure what to do about it." His fingers turned, intertwining with hers. "We don't have to do anything, not yet. We can just be together." "Together," Emma repeated, and the word felt like a promise all its own. The shooting lessons began the next day. James set up tin cans on fence posts behind the barn, then showed Emma how to hold his spare revolver, a smaller piece than his Colt, but still heavy in her inexperienced hands. "Like this," he said, standing behind her, his chest against her back, his arms coming around to adjust her grip. His voice rumbled against her spine. "Keep your elbows loose, but steady. Breathe out slowly and squeeze the trigger. Don't pull." Emma tried to focus on his instructions, but all she could think about was the heat of him surrounding her, the way his breath stirred the hair near her ear, the strength in his hands as they guided hers. When she finally squeezed the trigger, the recoil shocked her, but James's arms absorbed it, keeping her stable. The can didn't move. "Again," James said. "You're aiming too high. Lower your sight line just a fraction." They spent an hour like that, James's patience endless, his presence intoxicating. By the end, Emma had knocked down 3 cans and was grinning with triumph. "You're a natural," James said, genuine pride in his voice. "Few more weeks, you'll be dangerous." "Good," Emma said, ejecting the spent shells like he'd taught her. "I want to be dangerous. I'm tired of being afraid." James caught her hand, stilling her movements. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, calloused skin against calloused skin. Her hands had toughened from the ranch work. "You were never weak, Emma." Survival takes more strength than most people ever need. But I understand wanting to feel powerful. It matters, out here. That night, Emma woke to the sound of thunder rolling across the prairie. She went to her window and saw lightning illuminating massive storm clouds, advancing like an army. The wind picked up, howling around the house's corners, and rain began to fall in sheets. Then she heard it, the cattle. Their panicked lowing carried even over the storm's roar. Emma dressed quickly and ran into the main room. James was already there, pulling on his boots, his hair disheveled from sleep, but his eyes alert. "Stay inside," he ordered, reaching for his hat and duster. "The herd's spooked. We need to—" "Let me help," Emma interrupted. "I can ride now. You need every hand. It's too dangerous. If the cattle stampede, then you'll need me even more." She grabbed the spare duster hanging by the door, the one James had given her for cold mornings. "I'm not helpless anymore, remember? You taught me that." Something fierce and proud flashed across James's face. "Stay close to me. Don't try to be a hero." They rode out into chaos. The storm lashed at them with rain and wind, lightning turning night to day in jagged bursts. The cattle were running, a river of panicked beef flowing toward the edge of the property, where a ravine dropped 20 feet to rocky ground. James spurred Storm forward, and Emma followed on Daisy, her heart in her throat. The other men were already out there, trying to turn the herd, but the cattle were blind with fear. "There!" James shouted, pointing toward the lead animals. "We turn them back toward the barn." Emma rode beside him, her body moving with Daisy's rhythm now, without thought. All the afternoon riding lessons paying off. They flanked the stampede, James on one side and Emma on the other, gradually forcing the cattle to curve away from the ravine. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Tons of muscle and horn thundering past, close enough to touch, while lightning split the sky and rain obscured everything. Then Emma saw him, a young calf separated from the herd, running straight toward the ravine. Without thinking, she turned Daisy toward it, leaning low over the mare's neck. "Emma, no!" James's shout barely reached her. She reached the calf just as it neared the edge, Daisy cutting it off with the instincts of a trained cow horse. The calf turned back toward the herd, but in doing so, it collided with Daisy's shoulder. The mare stumbled. Emma felt herself falling, saw the ground rushing up. Strong arms caught her. James pulled her onto Storm's back in front of him, his arm an iron band around her waist. They galloped away from the ravine's edge, the thunder of hooves and Storm competing for dominance. "What the hell were you thinking?" James roared in her ear, but his arm tightened protectively. "You could have been killed." The calf, is alive because you're insane and brave and damn it, Emma. He pulled Storm to a halt near the barn, where the cattle were finally settling, turned back from disaster. Don't ever scare me like that again. Emma twisted to look at him. Rain plastered his hair to his skull, ran in rivulets down his face. His eyes blazed with an emotion she couldn't name. Anger and fear and something else. Something that made her breath stop. I'm sorry, she whispered. I just saw it and James kissed her. It was sudden and fierce, his mouth crashing against hers with all the pent-up terror of the last half hour. Emma gasped against his lips, and he gentled immediately, one hand coming up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. The kiss softened into something sweet and desperate, a question and an answer all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James pressed his forehead to hers. I can't lose you, he said, his voice raw. I know I have no right to say that. I know it's too soon, that you owe me nothing. But watching you ride toward that ravine, thinking I might, his voice broke. I can't lose you, Emma. You won't, Emma said, her hands coming up to frame his face, feeling the scrape of stubble against her palms. James, you won't lose me. I'm here, I'm staying. Promise me, he demanded. Promise me you'll be careful, that you'll... I promise, she said, and kissed him again, softer this time, trying to convey everything she felt but couldn't yet say. Together, remember? That means I don't take foolish risks alone. His arms tightened around her, and they sat there on Storm's back in the pouring rain, holding each other while the storm gradually spent itself and the cattle settled and the ranch hands worked to secure everything. When they finally rode back to the house, neither of them spoke about the kiss, but James's hand found hers as they walked to the porch, their fingers intertwining. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the air washed clean by the storm. Emma woke to find wildflowers on her pillow, prairie roses, their pink petals still damp with dew. Her heart squeezed. James must have picked them before dawn and left them while she slept. She dressed and went to the kitchen to find him already there, cooking breakfast for once. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and the soft smile on his face was something precious. Morning, he said. Sound the flowers? They're beautiful. Emma set them in the mason jar on the kitchen table. Thank you. I wanted to do something for you. You're always doing for everyone else. He flipped the bacon, his movements unpracticed but earnest. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about being together. I want that, Emma, but I need you to know what that means out here. Emma moved to stand beside him, taking over the bacon before it burned. Tell me. It means I'm courting you, properly, which means the men will gossip like hens, and anyone we meet in town will make assumptions, and your reputation will be tied to mine. He turned to face her fully. It also means I'm making a claim, that I won't take kindly to anyone else looking at you with interest. I'm not a possessive man by nature, but where you're concerned, he shook his head. I find I'm discovering all sorts of feelings. James's expression transformed, hope and heat mingling in those pale blue eyes. Then I'd say I'm the luckiest man in Kansas. Then court me, James Coulter. Emma stepped closer, emboldened by the way his breath hitched. Bring me flowers, and teach me to shoot and kiss me in rainstorms. Show me what it's like to be with a man who sees me as a person, not property. He cupped her face with both hands, his touch reverent. I'll die before I hurt you, Emma. That's a promise. Then he kissed her, slow and deep, pouring 4 years of loneliness and longing into the press of his lips. Emma melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, tasting coffee and promise, and the beginning of something that felt like forever. The bacon burned, but neither of them cared. Courting James Coulter was unlike anything Emma had imagined. He was by turns tender and fierce, respectful and passionate, always careful to honor her boundaries, but never hiding his desire. He brought her wildflowers every few days, different colors and varieties, teaching her their names: Indian paintbrush, black-eyed Susans, wild bergamot. He took her riding across the prairie in the evenings, showing her the best places to watch sunset, pointing out deer tracks and hawk nests and the subtle signs of changing seasons. And he talked to her. They'd sit on the porch after dinner, the men in the bunkhouse giving them privacy, and James would tell her about his dreams for the ranch, his memories of Mary, his thoughts on everything from politics to poetry. He listened when she talked too, truly listened, asking questions and remembering details from previous conversations. With him, Emma felt seen in a way she never had before. But the ghost of her past wasn't finished with her yet. 6 weeks after Emma's arrival at the Double C, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Emma was in the garden behind the house, pulling weeds, when she heard Marcus call out a greeting. Something in his voice made her freeze. She stood slowly, wiping dirt from her hands, and walked around to the front of the house. A well-dressed man sat astride a glossy black horse, too clean and too expensive for ranch country. His face was lean and sharp, his eyes cold as they swept the property. "I'm looking for Emma Hartford," the man said, his accent placing him firmly in Philadelphia's elite circles. "I was told she might be here." Emma's blood turned to ice. She recognized that voice. Howard Blackwell, her stepfather's business partner, the man she'd fled rather than marry. James emerged from the barn, his posture relaxed but his hand resting on the butt of his revolver. "Who's asking?" "Howard Blackwell, attorney at law from Philadelphia, Miss Hartford's fiancé." He smiled, showing too many teeth. "Her stepfather is quite worried. She left without a word 3 months ago." 2 months, Emma said, stepping into view. Her voice came out steady, despite the fear coursing through her. "And I'm not your fiancé. I never agreed to that arrangement." Howard's eyes locked onto her, and Emma saw the flash of rage before he masked it with false concern. "Darling, your stepfather has legal guardianship until you turn 21. That gives him the right to arrange your marriage as he sees fit. I've come to bring you home, where you belong." "She's 22, James said flatly, "and she belongs wherever she damn well chooses. You're on my land, Blackwell. State your real business or ride out." Howard's mask cracked. "My business is retrieving stolen property. Miss Hartford took items of significant value when she fled. Jewelry, cash, family heirlooms. Her stepfather wants them returned, along with his ward." Liar. Howard dismounted, moving toward Emma with predatory intent. "You'll come back with me, and you'll—" James stepped between them, and the change in him was startling. The gentleman who brought her flowers was gone, replaced by someone dangerous. A reminder that before he was a rancher, James Coulter had been a drover who'd fought off rustlers and hostile territory. His hand remained on his gun, his expression cold as winter. "Touch her and you'll lose the hand," James said softly. "That's not a threat, Blackwell. It's a guarantee." "You can't threaten an officer of the court." "I can protect a woman on my land from an unwanted advance. There's no law against that." James's voice remained calm, but his body was coiled tension. "Emma's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go. And from where I stand, she wants you gone. She's not yours to protect." Howard's composure shattered completely. "Do you know what she is? A thief and a whore who will spread her legs for anyone who offers her a meal. I'm doing you a favor, cowboy. She's used goods. The punch happened so fast, Emma barely saw it. One moment Howard was speaking, the next he was on the ground, blood pouring from his nose. James standing over him with murder in his eyes. "Get up," James said, his voice deadly quiet. "Get on your horse and ride off my land. If you ever speak about Emma that way again, if you even think her name, I'll hunt you down and finish what I started. Are we clear?" Howard scrambled to his feet, hate and fear warring in his expression. "This isn't over. I'll get the law involved. The sheriff's a friend of mine," Marcus called from the barn, where he and the other men had gathered, all of them armed. "And he don't take kindly to men harassing women, especially when those men are lying about legal guardianship of an adult." Howard looked at the 5 armed men, at James' unwavering stance, at Emma standing tall despite her trembling. Finally, he spat blood into the dirt and mounted his horse. "You'll regret this," he said to Emma. "Both of you will." "The only thing I regret," Emma said, finding her voice, "is not leaving Philadelphia sooner. Goodbye, Mr. Blackwell. Tell my stepfather I'm never coming back." They watched him ride away until he was just a dot on the horizon. Only then did James turn to Emma, his anger dissolving into concern. "Are you all right?" He reached for her, then stopped, his bloody knuckles making him hesitate. "Emma?" She threw her arms around him, not caring about the blood or the watching men or anything except the solid reality of him. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you for protecting me." James's arms came around her, crushing her against him. "Always," he said into her hair. "I told you I'll die before I let anyone hurt you." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Every shadow seemed to hide Howard Blackwell's face. Every creak of the house made her jump. Finally, she gave up and went to the main room. Thinking to make tea, James was there, sitting in the dark, staring at the cold fireplace. He looked up when she entered, and even in the dimness she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. Emma shook her head, moving to sit beside him on the sofa. "I keep thinking he'll come back, that he'll bring the law, or worse, that my stepfather will come himself." "I won't let them take you." James shifted to face her, taking her hands in his. "Emma, I need you to listen to me. If Blackwell does come back with some legal writ, if he tries to force the issue, I want you to know, I'll fight it. I'll hire the best lawyer in Kansas. I'll testify to what he said and how he acted. I'll do whatever it takes." "James, let me finish." His grip tightened. "But there's one thing that would stop him cold. One thing that would end any legal claim your stepfather or Blackwell might try to make." Emma's heart began to pound. "What?" "Marry me." The words came out rushed, almost desperate. "I know it's fast. I know you might not be ready. But if you were my wife, they'd have no claim on you. You'd be under my protection legally, not just morally. They couldn't touch you. You want to marry me to protect me?" Emma's voice came out small, hurt bleeding through despite her attempt to hide it. "No. God, no." James released her hands to cup her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Emma, I want to marry you because I'm in love with you. Because you're the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever met. Because you make this house feel like a home instead of just a building. Because when I think about my future, all I see is you." His thumbs stroked her cheekbones, his touch infinitely gentle. "I'm asking now, because Blackwell's appearance made me realize I can't lose you. But even if he'd never shown up, eventually, when you were ready, I would have asked anyway. I want you as my wife, Emma Hartford. Not as a convenience, not as protection, but because I love you." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling the moment you told me I was a person, not property. You've shown me what it means to be valued, to be seen, to be safe. You've given me more in 2 months than I had in 22 years before. Is that a yes?" Hope and fear mingled in James's expression. "Yes." Emma laughed through her tears. "Yes, James Coulter, I'll marry you. Not just for protection, though I'll take that gladly, but because you're the best man I've ever known. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you." "You've got that backwards," James said, and kissed her with such tender passion that Emma felt it all the way to her soul. "I'm the one who needs to prove worthy of you." They were married 3 days later in Dodge City, with Marcus, Diego, Tommy, and Samuel standing as witnesses. Emma wore a simple dress of cream linen that the men had pooled money to buy as a wedding gift, and James wore his Sunday best, black trousers and vest over a white shirt, his hair slicked back and his jaw freshly shaven. They spoke their vows in front of a circuit preacher, promising to love and honor through all the hardships the prairie could throw at them. When James kissed his bride, the men whooped and hollered, and Emma laughed against her husband's mouth, joy bubbling up from some deep well inside her. The wedding night was tender and sweet, James taking his time to show Emma what love could be between a man and woman who truly cared for each other. He was patient with her nervousness, gentle with her inexperience, and when she finally relaxed into his touch, the pleasure he brought her was like nothing she'd imagined. "I've got you," he murmured against her skin over and over. "I'll always have you." Afterward, they lay tangled together, Emma's head on James's chest, his fingers trailing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I never thought I could feel this safe," Emma said quietly. "This loved." James pressed a kiss to her hair. "Get used to it, Mrs. Coulter. You're stuck with me now." "Good," Emma said, and meant it with her whole heart. But their peace was short-lived. 2 weeks after the wedding, Howard Blackwell returned, this time with 5 hired guns and a forged writ, claiming Emma was an escaped mental patient who needed to be returned to her guardian's care. The confrontation happened at dawn. Emma was in the kitchen, making breakfast, when she heard horses approaching. Too many horses. She looked out the window, and her blood ran cold. "James," she called, but he was already there, pulling on his gun belt, his face grim. "Stay inside," he ordered. "No matter what happens, stay inside." But Emma knew that look, knew that he'd fight to protect her, possibly die to protect her. And she wasn't going to let that happen. She grabbed the revolver James had given her, a wedding gift, loaded and ready, and followed him onto the porch. The men were already emerging from the bunkhouse, armed and alert. Howard sat his horse at the head of the group, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "James Coulter, I've returned with legal authority to reclaim my fiancée." "That's my wife you're talking about," James said, his hand hovering near his gun. "And that writ isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Emma's never been in an asylum, and even if she had, marriage to me supersedes any guardianship claim." "Does it?" Howard pulled out a pistol. "I think we'll let the courts decide after I've retrieved her." The next few moments happened in a blur. Howard's men drew their weapons. James's hand flashed to his Colt. Emma, seeing Howard aim at James's heart, raised her own revolver. "No!" she screamed, and fired. The bullet caught Howard in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. His men froze, caught between retreat and attack. That moment of hesitation was all James and his crew needed. "Drop your weapons," James ordered. his gun trained on the nearest hired gun. You're outnumbered and outmatched. Your employer's wounded and liable to bleed out if he doesn't get medical attention. So here's how this plays out. You load him on his horse. You ride back to wherever you came from. And you tell Emma's stepfather that if he ever sends anyone after her again, it won't be a shoulder wound next time. The hired guns looked at each other, at Howard writhing in the dirt, at the 5 determined ranchers with decades of frontier experience between them. Slowly, they lowered their weapons. "Smart choice," Marcus said, moving forward to confiscate their guns. "Now get gone before we change our minds." They loaded Howard onto his horse, the man cursing and threatening with every breath. As they rode away, Howard looked back at Emma, rage and disbelief warring on his pale face. "This isn't over," he shouted. "You're just a—" Emma raised her gun again, her hand steady. "Goodbye, Mr. Blackwell. Next time, I won't aim for your shoulder." Only after they disappeared over the horizon did Emma's hands start to shake. The revolver slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the porch. James was there immediately, pulling her into his arms. "It's over," he murmured, holding her tight. "You're safe. You're safe." "I shot him," Emma said, her voice distant. "I actually shot him." "You protected yourself. You protected all of us." James pulled back enough to look at her face, his expression fierce and proud. "You were magnificent, Emma. Dangerous and brave and absolutely magnificent." "I was terrified." "So was I. But we faced it together, remember?" He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her mouth. "Together. Always together." Samuel cleared his throat from behind them. "Hate to interrupt, but we should probably report this to the sheriff." "Get it on record before Blackwell tries to spin his own version." James nodded, his arms still around Emma. "Good thinking. Emma and I will ride into town." "We'll all go," Diego interrupted. "Show of solidarity. The more witnesses, the better." The sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Garrett who'd known James for years, listened to their account and examined Howard's forged writ with a practiced eye. "This is garbage," Garrett pronounced, tossing the document on his desk. "Poor forgery, wrong judge's seal, dated after Mrs. Coulter's marriage, which would invalidate it anyway. If Blackwell or Emma's stepfather show up in my jurisdiction again, I'll arrest them for attempted kidnapping and fraud." He looked at Emma, his expression kind. "You did the right thing, ma'am. Self-defense, pure and simple. And from what James tells me, you've got the right to defend your home and husband as much as he does." The ride back to the Double C was quiet, Emma processing everything that had happened. When they finally reached the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. "I need to tell you something," Emma said as James helped her down from Daisy. "When I pulled that trigger, I wasn't just protecting you. I was claiming my life, my choice, my freedom." She looked up at him, this man who'd given her everything. "For the first time since my mother died, I felt powerful, in control of my own destiny." "You always were," James said softly. "You just needed the chance to prove it." That night they made love with a new intensity, celebrating their survival and their choice to build a life together. And when Emma woke the next morning to find James watching her sleep, his pale blue eyes full of love and wonder, she knew with absolute certainty that she was home. The years that followed were good ones. Emma never heard from her stepfather or Howard Blackwell again. Garrett's threats and Emma's demonstrated willingness to defend herself apparently convinced them she wasn't worth the trouble. The ranch prospered, the cattle herd growing to 500 head. Emma's cooking became legendary in the county, and more than once, neighboring ranchers tried to poach her for their own spreads, offers that made James growl possessively and Emma laugh. 2 years after their marriage, Emma gave birth to a daughter with James's pale blue eyes and Emma's honey blonde hair. They named her Mary after James's sister, and when James held his child for the first time, tears streaming down his weathered face, Emma knew that all the pain and fear had been worth it for this moment. The day James first rode into Dodge City to buy cattle, he couldn't have imagined he'd find his first love serving whiskey in a saloon, half-starved and desperate, but still unbroken. But as Emma often told their daughter when she was old enough to understand, sometimes the best thing, he set one up on a fence post and handed her a revolver. For old time's sake, he asked, that boyish smile she loved so much transforming his face. Emma took aim and fired, knocking the can into the grass. Still dangerous, she said, grinning. James pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers with the ease of long practice. Still mine, he murmured against her mouth. Still yours, Emma agreed, and you're still mine. Together, James said. Together, Emma echoed, and sealed the promise with a kiss as the prairie wind whispered through the grass and the sun set over the land they'd built into a home. Years later, when people asked Emma about her journey from Philadelphia to the Kansas prairie, she'd smile and say, the cowboy rode into town to buy cattle and found his first love serving whiskey in the saloon. But what he really found was his future, and what I found was my freedom. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you were always meant to have. And if pressed, she'd add, the best love stories aren't about being saved. They're about two people choosing to save each other every single day, through every hardship and joy. That's what James and I built. A love that was ours, earned and chosen, and fiercely protected. A love worth every risk, every fear, every moment of doubt. Because in the end, we didn't just survive, we thrived together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of James and Emma's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.